No. We're good. Thank you. Good morning, everybody. I'll call this meeting to order October 20th, 2022. It's 10 a.m. This is a meeting of the Assembly Enterprise Utility Oversight Committee. We are meeting with a pretty packed agenda at this point with the intent to go through a number of ordinances that are coming before us, a resolution, and hear a brief conversation from our friends on the Government Hill Community Council as well. We have two items that are on our standard unfinished business section, and that's the continued discussion, Port of Alaska Plan of Finance and the Eklutna River Restoration. We're going to hold both of those. The continued discussion, Port of Alaska Plan of Finance, will kind of get wrapped into a couple of the ordinances that are relating to the port. And then the Eklutna discussion, we can come back to that, but the intent is to have that conversation at the next joint meeting of the government of the Native Village of Eklutna with the Assembly, which should be in November, but it's not yet scheduled. So, Madam Clerk, would you please take the roll?
Ms. Allard?
Here.
Mr. Constant?
Here.
Mr. Cross?
Here.
Mr. Dunbar?
Here.
Ms. LaFrance?
She should be here just
Here.
a moment. Oh, there she is.
Mr. Presverdia? Mr. Peterson?
Present.
Ms. Quinn Davidson? Mr. Rivera? Mr. Salt?
He's excused.
Mr. Voland?
Here.
And Ms. Alatel? You have quorum.
All right, thank you. And I understand Ms. Alatel will also be here pretty soon. She had a conflict at the beginning part of the meeting. So first up, we have under new business, Part A, AO 2022-94, proposed plant replacement improvement surcharge mechanism by AWWU. Mr. Corsentino.
Morning, I'm Mark Corsentino, Anchorage AWW General Manager. I'm going to turn over the heart of this presentation to Grant Utrenka, who is AU CFO and acting MOA CFO at this point in time. So Grant, go ahead.
Good morning. I promised a 5-minute presentation, so I'll try and keep it to 5 minutes. AWU is proposing a different style of rate increase in our 2023 operating budget, and I wanted to give you a quick overview of it. As you're probably aware, AWU is municipal owned. We have separate accounting and financial reporting. We have our separate audited financial statements. We're funded by our customers and ratepayers, not by taxpayers. We are economically regulated by the RCA, the Regulatory Commission. They're charged with basically two things. One, that we charge just and reasonable rates to customers, and that we're sustainable into the future. We're a monopoly by design, and therefore our rates are regulated by the state of Alaska. Any tariff changes, which this will be, have to be approved by the Assembly as well as the RCA, and the RCA has ultimate jurisdiction over the water and wastewater utilities. So basically there's three ways for the bill to change, if you will. One's a revenue requirement study, and you may remember at the end of last year, we implemented a rate increase on interim and refundable rates. We have a hearing in front of the RCA scheduled for the week before Thanksgiving to finalize those rates. You also may recall that in April, there was a cost of service study where we rearranged rates a little bit to more appropriately charge cost causer, cost payer to equitably. And then this time we're proposing a plant replacement and improvement surcharge mechanism. That's a state term, but at the end of the day, it is a rate increase.
For clarification, the cost of service study is not it does not increase our revenue. It just reallocates rates to make sure that equitably charge the customers the cost causer, cost payer principle. The other two, revenue requirement, PRISM, are both actual rate increases, just a different methodology that we'll get to in the next slide. Go ahead.
So we chose PRISM this year because it allows us to recoup our capital improvements on eligible assets. Treatment plants, for instance, are not allowable. And so previous years, we haven't used PRISM because we had significant improvements to our treatment plants. This is a smaller burden on our ratepayers. If we did a full-blown revenue requirement study, followed it with the RCA, we would have about a 5.4% increase to ratepayers this year. We used Prism, which will be a blended about 1.36% increase. It's far less expensive for AWU. We don't have to go through a full-blown rate hearing. When we go through full-blown rate hearings with both utilities, it's about a $750,000 annual cost, quite significant. And now, because of some of our vacancy positions, we, like everybody else, is having a hard time finding qualified people. We are deferring we don't have the personnel to do some of our planned and predictive maintenance, which is saving us money in the short term, but will cause us money in the long term. But so because of how we operated in 2022, this will allow us to still meet all our financial metrics, bond covenants, that kind of thing. So the basic difference between a simplified revenue requirement calculation, we're able to recoup all our operating costs, depreciation, MUSA, and we get a return on our investment of our equity of our assets. Prism allows us to recoup the depreciation, MUSA, and the return on the investment of the additional assets we've added eligible assets since the last revenue requirement study. Does not allow us to recoup our operating expenses, and that's why it's a lower increase than the full-blown revenue requirement system. Prism was passed by the Alaska Administrative Code in 2017. There are certain items that we need to comply with to meet that code. The most burdensome is a long-term infrastructure plan and asset optimization plan that we file with the RCA. Again, it's eligible plant. There are customer protections, and we'll talk about that in a minute, of notifications and that type of stuff, so customers are informed. We have some bill inserts going out in the November billings to our customers, informing us them what it is. We're referring them to our website, where we'll have frequently asked questions to try and minimize calls into the call center. So it will show the water utility you see on the upper half, wastewater on the lower half. You'll see the Prism, it's a $1.08 on their bill for water and 44% increase on their sewer. That does not include the regulatory cost charge, which is a percentage additionals that the state charges to fund the RCA, essentially.
And to that point, the AO is slightly different in the numbers. We made a correction. So there's an S version you'll see at the assembly meeting to reflect these numbers, which are not the same. They're slightly off by about a nickel or so on either side. So we'll have that corrected in the S version at the assembly meeting Tuesday. And then the next slide.
Will that be the only change?
Yes.
Okay, thanks.
Well, you'll see the S version. It'll cross off. The percentages will change. The dollar and the percentages both will change for each utility subtly. That's the only change.
No, that's okay. Thanks.
So
in 2017, when Prism was first authorized by the state, we looked at our customer information system and added it. So it will look pretty much like this when the actual bills go out. You'll see in the upper right-hand corner, they did change it to 2022. Okay, new one. But you'll see it'll show up as the Prism charge at the bottom. And even when we do our next revenue requirement study, those rates will drop to zero, but the lines will remain on the bill. Any questions?
Mr. Cross.
So just for clarification, so you're going to add the water Prism as a line item on the bill. And how long will that be on there till you say it drops to zero?
The line item will stay on the bill into perpetuity at this point. But the amount will be zero because we have to recoup that amount in a revenue requirement study. And so it will just show a zero on the bill.
in other words, Kevin, you'll see the line here still, but when we do the next revenue requirement study a year later, it'll go from $1.15 to zero.
Okay.
Because the next revenue requirement will consider that rate in future rates.
Yeah, and if you ever need to enact a PRISM fund again in the future, then
There'd be a new line item, that's
there'd be a
right.
new line
It
item.
is a benefit to everyone because it does save everyone dollars.
I think most utility
Chris.
payers, they look at just like their phone bill and stuff, and they see all these line items and all these, and they feel like they're getting nickel and dimed. So, all right, thank you.
Mr. Dunbar.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So just to reiterate, the actual action before us on Tuesday night is not to approve this, but rather approve you asking the RCA for this, right?
Correct.
And so when do you think the actual bill will change? Like what month will the customer see
January.
their bill increase?
January.
January.
We have to file with the RCA by November 15th in order to implement it by the first of the year.
And how confident are you that it'll sort of sail through the RCA?
It will sail through, although the Attorney General's office through RAPA will seek discovery on what we've submitted and may or may not challenge anything that we have, but it's a much more efficient way for us and them to get the rates through the RCA.
If they challenge it, will that delay the customer bill changing?
No, it will still implement it and it could be refundable until finalized.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Anything else on this one? So there are some members who aren't here, so I anticipate there could be some more questions when we get down to it, but that seems pretty straightforward, and thank you for the presentation.
So, and one additional comment, I guess, is these are the rates that are in our 2023 operating budget.
Great. Mr. Peterson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm looking at the C, and for fiscal year '24, it's got an increase of revenue of 3.9 million, but next year, or in '23, it's only 1.2 million. Why is there such a big increase between the 2 years?
So we use our long-range financial plan to plan for lending as well as rate increases and that type of thing. And so we're using the models that we have, assuming we're going to spend at budget, which would drive that, but our rates are dependent on not what our budgets are, but what we actually spend. And typically we spend a little bit below budget. So that number will change, but that's where we're projecting. And we use all our projections for long-range planning for debt covenants as cash on hand, that type of thing.
And to further that, in the budget book, you'll see that we have our eight-year summary of where we plan to be looking forward. Those are, I don't know, guesstimates. I mean, they're thoughtful. They're assuming certain scenarios that may or may not play out. So those are what we predict we'd spend. But every year we have to true it up, and oftentimes it's less than that. But well, I'm not going to say that. I got to be careful when I say that. We strive to improve and be better, but these are just what we have to portray to people so they understand where we're looking for down the road.
Okay. Thank you.
Anyone else? All right, hearing none on that item. Next in the queue, welcome Mr. Zapay from Solid Waste Services. We have 2 items from Solid Waste Services. First up, we'll tackle AO 2022-92, amending code to increase rates for the refuse collection utility. Mr. Zapay, welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Constant. Did you say 20, which one was that?
The first one is 92. It's kind of
92.
backwards, but,
Okay.
oh, excuse me, 91. It's the disposal utility. I'm sorry.
91, okay. Okay, as you know, we're asking for another rate increase that was actually consistent with our long-range financial plan that we had presented to the Assembly in 2018. And the rates that we're asking for are just to set us on track to meet our debt covenants that were imposed in our existing borrow program to a long-term financing in 2022. The covenants will require some minimum amounts of cash on hand debt coverage, usually 1.35 of debt payments, debt to equity ratios, and we're working hard with needing amounts through a step-up rate increase program instead of one or two large increases at one time. The Assembly approved a 10-year plan for us. I think we're in the 5th year of that plan now of our rate increase. And then we're also going to ask for another 5 years as we sell our bonds. Our bonds are on the market right now, as we speak. And that be another 5-year increases that we're going to ask for also for our bond issuance. And we're asking for the increase, of course, to keep us in a healthy financial position. As you know, we we didn't get rate increases for 10 years. The Assembly approved us to get us back on track. We're still well under all the other landfills on the West Coast, and even Palmer, we're still like only 2/3 the price of Palmer dump fees. So as we graduate in the future here, we hope to get our rates up to where we can sustain our utility.
Do you mind going through it? There's just a handful of changes specifically in the ordinance. Can you walk us through them?
Okay. Susan, you want to do that? The changes.
Please state your name for the record, Susan.
Susan Kent Crafts.
Oh, there we go.
You're not good.
Susan Kent Crafts, the CFO for Solid Waste Services.
Thank you.
We attempted to not impact all the fees for the disposal in particular. We are increasing the base rate by $2 and the plastic garbage bag fee by $1. The 66 width, 36 height fee by $2. And the per load rate, this is the base fee. I went from 16 to 18 is $2. The solid waste disposal facility fee went by $1 per load, or by, I think it's $3 for a ton. We didn't change anything in hazardous waste. We are working on a contract for hazardous waste. We haven't gotten a contractor with that yet. We did add a couple of new rates. We are moving to a weight scale system with the new building, which will require an RFID window sticker. So we have a $20 fee for the stickers. We did add that.
Walk through, can you point to the page in the line?
I'm sorry. The RFID is on page 5. I was looking for that. Oh, I'm sorry, I missed one on the first page. We had a new commercial construction demolition debris fee. That is a brand new fee for the landfill, and it's $110 per ton.
Yeah, I want to expand on that. The $110 fee, we're trying to get into we're trying to get our C&D customers to go to some different sites so it'll get shredded. So we want to up our rates to be the same rate as the third party that would actually, people could take their C&D to and they'd actually shred it. So they take all the recyclables out of it. And then when it gets to us, it's like 50% of what it would be if we took the C&D at our landfill. Saves a lot of airspace, and we hope that we can push all our customers to go to this facility, or there's 2 facilities in Anchorage that can handle that material. They'll shred it, take the recyclables out, and then send the rest to us at a discounted rate. So it'll slow our C&D down at the landfill, save us a bunch of airspace, because that's what we get most. The C&D is the biggest problem at the landfill for airspace. It fills up so fast because it's not shredded, it's hard to compact, and we got to bury it every day so we don't get a good compaction on it. And there's a lot of recyclables that can be taken out. So this $110 fee will maybe induce them to take it to a different facility to get recycled. We're hoping that that'll help us out.
I am a little confused about the drafting of this ordinance. So since this is amending the code and it's not adding a new section, my assumption is all of this language except that which has marks is currently in the code.
Yes.
But what I'm seeing here is, say, line 17 on page 1, in standard legislative marking, you would underline and bold or at least underline the $8 if you're removing the $6. Are you actually changing the number to 8?
Yes.
Yes.
Right. And so then you come down and you say section 2A is a new section, which is line 34 and 35.
Yes.
That, the way it's drafted, appears that 2A, commercial construction, demolition, debris, CDD will be 110 is the current code, and then you're deleting 0. So I think that practically speaking, this ordinance, and maybe the next one, I haven't looked at it yet, might need to go back for an S version through the legal department to get it drafted properly. I'm not sure how this kind of made its way through, but it's super
Yeah.
unclear as to what's being added and what's being deleted from the code. And so
Okay.
then on the second page, it appears that everything is accurate, except that it doesn't show that you're removing anything when you go to 1125 on line 4 or 5. It just shows a new charge.
Yeah, I
It's
see
so
that.
it doesn't make any sense how it's written now that I see it. And so who do you work with on the 7th floor? Do you have someone? The law department?
I can't remember. her
Usually
name.
Ben.
So Ben, can you help them get to an S version for Monday?
Ben Bowman, Assistant Municipal Attorney, through the chair. You're asking if we can get it into a standard legislative drafting form?
Right, so we can understand and the future can
Yeah.
see what was changing. It's because it's not drafted quite right.
Yeah, we can get that sorted out for you.
And for example, like on page 3C1, line 15, 16, it appears that we are deleting general manager solid waste services and adding general manager solid waste services. So then it's accurate for section 2, C2. That's how it should be. Section C3, if that's a whole new section, it should all be underlined.
Chris, where was that at?
Same page 3 or page 5, I'm sorry.
Okay.
Section 2, C2A, the RFID piece, lines 23 and 24. It needs to be underlined.
Right.
Yeah, and so I was wondering why it was so hard to follow.
Yeah, sorry about that.
No, it's okay. I
I
mean,
think I know what happened, because this is an S version. I think it just, something got lost. When,
so this is just marking the changes from
from
the regular version that we don't have.
right,
Okay, so
because these were definitely all underlined in the original.
Desiree, is it possible to print out the original version?
Put it on the screen.
Yeah, that would be fine, actually. That would be great. Right, it doesn't seem like it's done. We got to see what the original in the S is.
For the public to be able to read this. Yeah, even if this is the S version, it needs to be revised, like you're talking about, in
Yeah.
terms of underlying and demonstrating where the new text is going in, just so the public can follow it.
So, I mean, we're pretty skilled at this and I can't read it. Ms. Alto has entered the building. So, yeah, if we're looking
Yeah.
here at, is this page 1? Page 1, section 8, 1. It is accurate there.
Okay.
And then if
Chair.
you come down to section 3, oh no, section 2.
Yeah.
Oh boy. This is really going to be hard to read because we don't have both.
The if it would help. The only thing that the S version changed was the last section, section 3.
Right, all the,
So as far as following.
so has this one been put through the system, this S version? It's already entered up into
Yes.
on base? Okay. So then we'll need an S one that makes it all just perfectly clear. So to the content. Are there any questions?
Yeah.
Mr. Dunbar?
Two things. So first, in section 3, and this goes for both ordinances.
On page 7.
Yes. It shows 24 through 28. Is 2023 omitted because we already passed that? And if so, remind me what the percentage increase was in 2023.
Well, 23 hasn't been passed.
It hasn't been
That's-
passed
that's
yet. This is 23. So the content of this AO is 2023. That's why it starts. at
So if you look at section 3, there's a list there. It goes 2024 through 2028.
Yes,
What was the equivalent number in 2023 percentage
It's-
increase?
it's 6 1/4.
6 1/4.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. And so this, you kind of have to look at both at the same time. Well, I guess I have a question about the way SWS finances are structured. Are the collection and disposal utilities, are their finances completely separate?
Yes.
Or there's no administrative overlap where they both contribute?
No.
Okay.
Aren't they essentially two utilities?
two utilities.
Yeah,
Okay.
Two
Collection
utilities.
and disposal.
So I'm looking at, because I'm looking at these and I'm seeing that our collection increases are larger than our disposal increases. Not significantly, but enough that it's noticeable. Percentage increase, I mean. And it seems like that, if they were blended, it seems like that would be the opposite approach I might take, because we own the only disposal utility, but there are a number of collection utilities, right? And I know because of, they don't really compete with each other, in most cases, but I guess I'm still thinking, why is that the case? Why are we increasing our collections more than we're increasing our disposal? And what you're telling me is they're basically unrelated.
They're-
Maybe not totally unrelated, but they are two separate utilities looking at two different cost structures and making totally independent calculations. Is that fair?
Yes, they're managed separately, yes.
If I might, I would ask the question slightly differently. So you have all of these other entities that are providing the collection services. It is more competitive. It's a much smaller rate paying base because you have fewer entities paying into it. And so the costs are they're still sunk wherever you are, but the disposal utility services everybody, so its ratepayer base is way bigger. And in that, you collect more in smaller increments.
Sure.
And so for me, I think it kind of slightly opposite of where you were going with it, that it's because they have a number of ratepayers that they're able to absorb costs in a different way.
Yes, and also moving to the new building, the split of the two utilities for that building is still the same. So it's going to be higher, which also makes those rates go up a little bit in the future.
So you're saying both the collection and the disposal utility were charged the same amount for the construction of the new administrative facilities?
There's a split that is being charged to the two facilities.
Okay.
It's a 60-40 basically split.
And which one got 60?
The disposal, it's the
Okay.
bigger
Good.
user.
Good. Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
All right, Ms. Alatone?
Thank you. Can you remind me whether or not the master plan indicated the potential change in rates? Like, did it predict what the change in rates would be, or did it just simply say that over time, to pay for the execution of the master plan, it would require rate increases? I don't remember. It was 2018.
Yeah, I think the master plan had the 10-year increase. in it.
Would you turn your mic on?
Sorry.
It had the 10-year increase
Yeah,
in it.
it's-
So
the-
do we know how these align to the projected increase back in the master plan?
They're exactly the same that were in the master plan, the
Oh,
5% and
great.
the 6 1/4.
Great. Okay. That's what I just wanted to know. Thank you.
So this question Anyone else? Mr. Cross?
When I last toured your facility before they began construction on the new one, and so two parts. One is that I'm concerned about your lack of diesel mechanics. Have you been able to fill some of those positions? Is some of this revenue looking at adjusting some of those pay rates in order to attract mechanics? I'm wondering what your situation is.
No, there's no pay increases in our budget for that. And we are attracting some. We just hired another, I think 2 weeks ago, we got another new guy. We're still down one. And
All right.
personnel's hard to come by.
No, that's better than you were a year ago. And then on the RFID sticker chips, you were charging 0, but now they're 20.
No, we didn't ever have RFID tags.
Okay,
So
so
when we
that's
get our new
new.
scanners, when we're trying to automate the new facility. So these RFID tags will, all the commercial customers that sign up for it, they won't even have to stop. They'll just pull on the scale. How a reader will read this RFID tag, be put into the system, and then they'll go dispose, come back out, and they'll just grab a piece of paper. No interaction with
Okay, so that's another section
Personnel.
of this that's not clear because I thought it was existing and we weren't charging and then but I see
Right.
now.
that's a brand new
That
charge.
gets
That's all
back
new.
to the issue of the
Yeah.
drafting.
Okay.
It doesn't effectively
curious
communicate
why
what's
we weren't-
happening.
Yeah, I was curious why we weren't charging for those, but okay, thank you.
Your confusion is shared. It's not the new guy thing. So this question might breach into Mr. Risvold's universe, but you mentioned that we're in the process of selling bonds. What does that do in the current bond market with the cost going up? Are we looking at more compounding rate increases over time because the rates are going up, or how do we absorb that as we move through this bond sale for all of these projects?
Mr. Constant, thank you for the question. We are selling bonds as we speak for solid waste services. And we're in the marketplace, and rates over the last year or so, as you know, have increased, and they're increasing during the day as we speak here. But we will get this bond sale done today. These rates that are proposed here in each of the last sections respectively are part of our model that requires us to have those kind of rate increases to support the debt that we're currently issuing today.
Right. And so those numbers, okay, let me restate, make sure I understood what you said. These numbers are taking into account the current nature of the bond market, the fact that everything is more expensive.
That is correct.
Okay, and are we projecting over the next 3 years that those numbers are going to continue to get more expensive, or do you think we're plateauing? Do you think we need to be prepared for more?
Mr. Constant, you prepared for more what, debt or more increases in rates or?
More expensive debt.
Well, in the current in the current interest rate environment recently here, as you know, rates have gone up, and it's part of the Federal Reserve's responsibility, if so to speak, to help control those rates, and they're doing the best they can. But rates are continuing to go up, and so it's hard to say when they'll stop.
Right. So it certainly begs the question of, do we contemplate this debt, even though it's more expensive, as cheap debt relative to what we're going to see in 5 years? And do we start to have a conversation about being more aggressive about being prepared for future work?
Well,
And we don't have to get into that now, but I just want to put that on the table as a marker that it feels like we're entering an environment that it could get even more prohibitive. And so we probably want to have that in our thinking. We can come back to that.
yes, sir.
Any other questions on this? So this one's a little tricky to contemplate what we're going to do with it until we see the S1 version that's really clear. And I don't know if we're going to find ourselves in the same boat for the 2022-92. But why don't we kind of do the same thing, a brief introduction of the item, and then let's go change by change, maybe call out the page number and the line number so people can see what we're talking about. That way we're all on a page. Thanks.
So as we move on to the residential refuse, it's the same indicators that we, for rate increases, just to the cost of doing business. And the 10 years we didn't get our rate increase, and this is just moving on with our master plan of rate increases. And it's about where we're at, same thing as, I can reiterate the same thing, but as in this utility, it's the same as the other one.
So why don't we just go through the changes so folks can understand the gravity of what we're talking about? So we can get those questions hopefully out of the way between now and Tuesday.
Okay, so on page 1, section 1, the conventional can or bag service, 32 gallon garbage can is moving to $25.
Do you have the line?
It's page 2, actually.
Oh, it's page 2
Page
maybe?
2.
Okay.
Section 1 is line 15, I guess.
Okay, there we go.
There. So single-family residential, we moved to 25, slightly higher than the 5% due to trying to do away with change.
Do away with what?
Change,
Yeah,
At
round
the
round
booth.
numbers.
round numbers, yes. That's one of the things we're actually trying to do is go do away with cash totally. And that's part of our move to the new building. The line 19, the customer bag charge moved to $2.50 from $2.44. Line 26, the one-person crew is 121.61, up from 115.82. And the overtime rate for that service is 135.46, up from 129.01. Line 34, a two-person crew is 137.59, up from 131.04. And this overtime for that service is 160.69, up from 153.04. And line 8 on page 3. So the 32-gallon standard cart went from 16 to 16.80. The 32-gallon bear roll cart went to 18.80 from 18. The 48-gallon standard cart went to 24.86 from 23.68. The 64-gallon standard cart went to 33.57 from 31.97. The 64-gallon bear cart went to 35.57 from 33.97. The 96-gallon standard cart is 46.57 from 44.35. The 96-gallon bear roll cart is $48.57 from 46.35.
Ms. Alzo.
Thanks. So you standardized the rates on the other one to $25, but these didn't. Why?
Because we standardized the ones that involve cash. These are accounts that are billed. So it's not an exchange of cash at a cash booth. These are ones.
So these accounts can't be paid in cash.
Well, no, they're not typically. They're either paid through over the phone with a credit card.
Well,
because
they either
they're-
can or can't be paid with cash.
They can be.
They can be, but they're not paid at a cash booth. The problem with accepting money at a cash booth is that you have a lot of change getting dropped
Yeah.
outside the window. We try to limit the amount of change involved in that transaction.
Makes
So I have a more basic question, and you might have covered it in the last one, and my apologies, because I was late. But what exactly drove the rate increases? Is it the percentage? So this is just the percentage increase, a percentage increase? Some rounded, some not?
Well, we didn't raise everything 5%. We tried to keep some things that are constant users not changed. And that was on the disposal side mostly. On this, there were a few things that we rounded up, a few things we didn't.
Okay, that seems really inconsistent, and that's really hard to go and explain to constituents, like what the rationale is. I mean,
The average is 5% for the rates.
But
For
I
the
think
rate
that they
increase.
did describe why, generally speaking, the rates aren't increasing, and it's to cover the debt,
Yes,
right? And so that was it's not to cover the expense of the operation, it's to cover the debt related to the expansion projects and
right.
other debt service.
that's not what I'm getting at. What I'm getting at is when consumers look at their bills and we go out and we give them the heads up that this is happening, because one of our jobs, particularly when we report to community councils, hey, there's going to be about this 5% increase. Someone will calculate their bill and it won't be 5%. It'll either be a little bit more or it won't be, and they'll be like, why? And it's not consistent. And so that is all I am asking about, is because it's not consistent across the board depending on which service you get. That was the question and the driver for it, because I think it's important that we can explain not only the why the rate's increasing, but what is the increase. And I'm not going to go and make a chart and
Right.
present this at every community council and say generally it'll be a 5% increase, but if it's not consistent and there's no specific rationale as to each one, then we just have to say it's what solid waste services did. Call them.
Okay, to respond to that, thank you for the question. The disposal side is the side that we did the rounding because of change. The refuse side, we did the 5%, but there are a couple of items we did not change at all. So there is a consistent 5% increase for the rates on the refuse side. Sorry for the confusion.
All the bills that,
And by refuse, do you mean collection or disposal?
Collections,
collections,
Okay,
yeah.
thank you.
sorry, yes,
And all the collections rates did go at 5%.
yes.
So they're all consistent with our residential pickup. It's just when they come across the scales, we rounded it up so they didn't have to have change.
Before you go, Kevin, does that have any impact on the RCA filing? Because it's not
They don't have RC filings.
that one.
Yeah.
Okay, that one's not right. That's right. I'm sorry. Crosswires.
You're the RCA to
Yeah,
this.
crosswires. Mr. Cross.
No, I understand what you're saying. It makes perfect sense. Whenever in those positions where you're handling cash, you rounded it.
Rounded up.
And then
Yes.
on the other ones where you're billing credit card or regular, then they just went 5%.
It's
So
just straight 5%,
I
yes.
understand. My question is on, what is this, page 4, section M, line 35 through 38. It says, you eliminated upon request Solid Waste Services will pick up carts for a fee of $34.73. So how is that, but we left the part that says they will arrange return of the roll-up cart. So now I'm curious, when someone ends service, are we not picking up the carts anymore? Are we not, or are we just not charging them?
Correct. We are just not charging them.
So on the last service, when they dump it, they just collect it since they're there already, emptying it for the last
Yes,
time.
exactly.
Okay, so we're removing a redundant charge since it would have been there anyway.
Yeah.
All right, thank you.
And the other reason is you can't bill after they're done. And that was the problem we were having, is those bills would carry out that particular charge isn't paid, and it just becomes
Well, and
an
then,
old debt.
and then what happens is someone gets up taking to collections on a $34
Right.
charge they didn't have,
Right.
or I've seen people being taken to
Yep.
collections over a $4 unpaid invoice they didn't know existed.
Right,
Particularly if it's into service and they move, because
Right.
they're no longer at that residence. They may not even know that they have this
Yes.
remaining charge. So
that's
excellent.
exactly right.
Makes perfect sense. Thank you.
All right. We'll continue.
We got kind of ahead. Okay, at the top of page 4, line 2, a return visit fee of $121.61, up from $115.82. Line 15, oversize from $12.50, up to $12.50 from $12.16. And extra bags, $2.50 up from $2.44. And the line 37 was just answered in our discussion. In line 41, termination of service, 158 up from 117.60. Line 46, damaged roll carts, 158.80 up from 117.60. On page 5, line 9, additional monthly fee charge, $10.21 up from $9.72. On page 6, line 13, stolen and damaged carts, 158.80 up from 117.60. On line 19, additional monthly fee, $10.21 up from $9.72. I apologize, some of these are repetitive rates that appear in several different sections. Line 31, a 32-gallon organics cart, $5.50 up from $5.25. 96-gallon organics, $11 up from $10.50. On page 7, line 14. A return roll cart charge, $158.80 up from $117.60. Line 20 is the same fee, $158.80 up from $117.60.
So I don't know if Mr. Bowman has left, but those marks also are not,
Oh, the
Consistent.
underlines aren't there.
those so far, I think are the only ones I've got. Did you catch that, Mr. Bowman?
No.
Yeah, so page 7, there are 2 amendments proposed that are not in standard markation. Yes, lines 14 and 21. So far, I believe if anyone hasn't caught anything else, those are the first in this.
Also, going to go down page 5, lines 42 and 43. Double check those. That was right at it there.
Oh, yes, the SWS.
Page 6.
Same with page 4. So I guess same issue, just close review of all the changes, standard format, S1 version. Thank you. Go ahead. I'll just add that it's good we caught these here because this would have stopped these from moving at the meeting on
Absolutely,
Tuesday.
yes. So line 35, the one-person crew, 121.61 up from 115.82. The overtime for that feature, 135.46 up from 129.01. Line 39, special pickup service, 137.59 up from 131.04. And the overtime for that, 160.69 up from 153.04. On page 9, line 3, repair charges, labor is 145.87 up from 138.92. Lids, 166.46 up from 158.53. Paint, 38.29 up from 36.47. Decals, 25.53 up from 24.31. Replacing dumpster, $382.88, up from $364.65. Replacing a locking device, $72.12, up from $68.69. Line 12. The extra fee is $10.21, up from $9.26. Line 17. Multiple unit extra bags, the $25, up from $23.14. And the same for another service, $25, up from $23.14. Line 24, containers with loose refuse and operator. 2 cubic, 1 time per week, 122, up from 116. 2 times a week,
I
240.
don't think you need to walk through every line in
Okay.
that table.
I was going to say.
Thank you.
It's going to take a while.
Yeah, I just for folks, a close look at that table
Okay.
and, yeah. Same with the next
The
table.
next table. It appears that they're all underlined. So section 10, or page 10, section 10, or line 10. Rental rates for an 8 cubic yard container, $24, up from $22.85. Locking mechanisms on line 15, $8, up from $7.58. Line 30, commercial recycling, roll cart, 96 gallon, 17, up from 16, 15. And 1 times per week, 33.9, up from 32.28. 2 times a week, 67.70, up from 64.58. On page 11, line 6, these are repetitive rates. The same rates appear throughout on different sections. So a 1-person crew, 121.61, up from 115.82. Overtime is 135.46, up from 129.01. A 2-person crew, 137.59, up from 131.04. And overtime, 160.69, up from 153.04. I think that's all of them.
Anyone have questions? Mr. Cross, go ahead.
Yes, I see that this, that we arduously went through, is a residential refuse service. I just want to speak to residential. Now, I get residential service on triplexes, fourplexes, and stuff. When you get in rollout cans. However, the municipality of Anchorage through development services still considers those commercial properties. So, what is the difference between how you interpret a residential property versus how development services and the building department references a commercial property? There seems to be differences in opinion.
I think if it's a fourplex, if it is a duplex is a residential, and a
Yep.
fourplex, I think is commercial. And as you go up, the apartment buildings are all commercial.
Where do triplexes fall?
That would be a commercial.
Okay, very good.
So that raises an interesting question. What about a duplex with an ADU on the property?
See where I'm going.
Yeah, that raised a variance. We don't have to get there right now, but it's something we're gonna have to think about. Mr. Bowman.
Just a question for staff because of we're doing some work on the redrafting. On page 10, lines 34, 35, is that mixed paper / cardboard? That's a deletion from the original code. Is that accurate?
Yes, that's a
Okay.
deletion.
And then similar up on page 11, line 1, that's just a replacement of words.
Yes.
And page 11, lines 15 through 23 is a deletion. We're removing section 4.
Yep.
Well, replacing section 4 with former section 5.
Yes.
Okay. And then adjusting some language in at page 11, lines 25 and 26, adjusting that language.
Yes.
Thank you.
So if anyone questions, I have a couple, not necessarily about the rates, kind of though. When I look at the 64 gallon bear resistant roll cart, it's $2 a month more. And I've lived in my house for roughly 5 years, and so that's 24 times 5 is 125. I've paid $125 in addition to ensure that the bears don't get into my trash. So what's the rationale for having me pay in an ongoing manner? Because I know it makes my neighbors not participate because they don't want to pay the fee. So what's the rationale for the fee being higher, for it going on indefinitely when I've paid for that can probably twice?
That's because it's a bear resistant can and they cost more. And then the rental is just ongoing as long as you have the property.
I understand that. So I'm going to pay, in addition to having trash stores, I'm going to pay for additional bear proof, and I'm going to pay for it multiple times because I've already paid the cost. What's the cost of a trash can?
$141.
Right. So now at 5 years, I've paid for it, but I'm going to pay for it again and again and
And
again.
again.
What's the rationale? Is there one? Is it just,
I-
that's how we do it?
I think that's
That's-
just the business model, Chris. Yeah.
Okay, so it's certainly, it's in room for consideration. We should be thinking about it. And then a second question, in similar vein that this raised up for me, maybe a third one. It strikes me interesting. It's page 10, lines 13 through 15. And maybe I'm missing something here. We're charging $8 a month for a lock that self-unlocks when a vehicle comes by and the driver doesn't have to get out of the vehicle. Is it that if they don't have that lock and they have another kind of lock and the driver gets out, it's more expensive than $8 a month more? Right, because it's $64 or no, 12 times 8, but 72, sorry, doing math on the fly, per year more. And then, yeah, I'm sorry, someone could do the math for me. $96, thank you. And so is it $96 a year more to have them get out of the truck?
Yeah, I don't think we'd even get out to unlock somebody's self-lock. It would have to be one of our locks. If that helps at all.
Okay, so just in order to have a locking unit that works with you
Yeah.
guys, it's gonna be $8, or they're gonna miss service that month if they don't, or
Yes.
week if they don't. Okay, then I think I had one more, but maybe not. That might have been it.
We try to limit the driver exiting the truck as much as we
Yeah.
can, so we come, that's where our
Yeah,
locking
I get
mechanisms
it.
come in, yeah.
I mean, I remember back in the days when you had anodized metal cans and guys were getting hurt all the time. Okay, I think that answers my question. Certainly raises the issue of the bear-proof cans and their expense and ongoing. Anyone else have questions? Mr. Cross?
Just on the bear-proof cans, I sent you that video from 10 days ago where I got charged by a
Right.
black bear running them out of my, I'd rather pay the extra expense for a bear-proof can than be chased by a black bear in my trash again. So it's a small, I think it's, and plus you would think a bear-proof can, the bears still mess with them. So they probably, and you don't punitize the owner for one that's destroyed by a bear, one that's damaged. They just replace it.
Yes.
And so
Right.
there's an aggregate in there. So
Yeah, I don't know.
in some areas where
I'd
I
love to
live,
see
the
that
trash
math.
cans get destroyed all the time. So
Right.
I have had the can flipped on its head, shaken by the bear, and they've never gotten in yet. Very effective. Right. That's the part that I have neighbors that will not move to a bear-proof can because they can't afford the additional expense on top of everything else. And so,
but then do they get fined if their trash is all over outside it? Do they get an extra fee? There's that fee for trash outside the
I
bag.
think
So if the guy's got to
code-
stop and pick it up, they end
code
up paying for
enforcement.
it.
Code enforcement has to come. Do you know how much code enforcement we have? You think we have enough to sufficiently police this kind of, I don't think we do. And so practically, anyhow, that's an area of consideration for me in the future. But any other concerns related to the rates or this ordinance as drafted, other than the fixes we're going to capture with the S1 version? Okay. So that means, thank you. That was a little close scrutiny, huh? Better here
was
than
good.
Tuesday night.
Yeah. Let's keep this figured out.
Yeah, better here. Yes, Mr. France.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a quick question. There were some issues with the bear-resistant cans in Girdwood. And can you speak to if those issues have been resolved?
The only service I provide in Girdwood is the transfer station. The cans that are down there are, the bear-proof cans are not from us. They're from a private hauler. And so I can't speak to the bear-proof. I know they have bear-proof cans, and the bears in Girdwood might be smarter than in Anchorage. I don't know, but I know that it's Chris
Thanks.
said his has been upside down. I have videos of them. The bears are smart.
Yeah.
And they'll figure out how to get them open after a while. So yeah, there's different variations of cans. But I watched this one video. This bear knew how to turn it over and push in the right spot. And that thing would just pop right open. And I don't know if there's anything we can do about that.
Thank you,
I think
Mr.
it's a
Zupay.
different question though, right? I think the question you're asking relates to that, I forget the title of it, the bear area section of the code that we created. And I don't know if that is a solid waste issue or if which department that falls into, but probably we can use a review of that plan because what we were intending to do was implement it in a couple of areas and then expand it as we go. And so I'm not sure who's
In the city, if it needs to be expanded, I think that could be worked through us to where there's no additional cost if they're in a bear area.
Yeah, I think as I just
Yeah.
had whispered in my ear that it's probably the municipal manager.
It is. Yeah, that's how it was set up, that the
Right.
municipal manager can declare, or maybe the assembly can through resolution, but I
that
think
was it.
it's the municipal manager declares it what is the term? Bears, trash safety, secure trash area.
So we don't have to, because we have such a packed agenda, get into that, but I'm putting it now, Desiree, into the category of new business for maybe the next agenda. So now.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Any other questions? That's a great question and Government Hill is interested. And the bears are smart in my neighborhood. They don't come to my can anymore because it's secure. They go to my neighbor's can and I pick up their trash for them. So, yeah, thank you. Next up on the agenda, we're going to move into the main events. We're going to bring up the port. We have AO 2022-86 here. That's an ordinance relating to authorizing 5-year lease between MOA Port and VB BTS LLS Vertical Bridge on municipal property, legally described as a portion of Track J, Port of Alaska subdivision, or maybe it's Port of Anchorage subdivision on the plats.
Yeah, that's the reference to the legal term.
Yeah, that's the plat. Yeah. And so subdivision addition number 2 for the construction and operation of a communication facility. Mr. Rebuffo, welcome. Mike. There you go.
So if I appear to be a little distracted, it's because I actually have the same sweater, and I'm glad I didn't wear it.
Twins, the sweaters.
A couple of minutes to make some introductions, because there's some folks here today that you probably are not familiar with as a group. But everybody knows David Ames from Jacobs, the program management consultant. He's the lead for the team. But sitting on my right over here is Mr. John Daly. John is now the PAMP engineering manager. He's filling the void created by Sharon Walsh's departure. And he's been on board now for about a month and a half. And we're glad to have him. He comes from R&M. And also from, in the past, he worked for Trick, Nyman and Hayes. I mentioned those two companies because there aren't two other companies in town that have had a historical working knowledge of how what the port is than those two companies there. So John has been exposed to all things port for a very, very, very long time, and it didn't take him any time at all to play catch up and climb the learning curve. So we are absolutely glad to have him. And you will be hearing more from him as, as we progress in this, in these efforts. Also here from Vertical Bridge is Sherry Greenshields. Where are you, Sherry? Yep, she's over there. So when we, if there are questions related to the cell tower, which I think, the item that you pulled was approval of a lease arrangement with Vertical Bridge to put a 150-foot cell tower on port property in the area called Track J, which is way up on the top of the hill. And if there are details about that you'd be interested in, and Sherry's got some background information, so we'll be prepared to talk about that when you're ready. But I do know that Government Hill has a presentation they'd like to make first.
Sure, come on up, Steve. Come on up. Mr. Gerlich.
And then we go Steve Refusing. Yeah.
So am I?
You're up, Mr. Gerlich. Please introduce yourself. Or maybe I can make a brief preamble. The neighbors on Government Hill have long been, since I think before any of us, even Mr. Rebuffo, have been involved with the port. The neighborhood has been working hard to repatriate a small section of land on Track J that was part of a major improvement to the neighborhood, a decommissioning of a tank farm that was abutting directly the neighborhood, and Ted Stevens funded the project. And it was quite an effort at the time, and it's an ongoing effort. And so with that light briefing, I am going to go ahead and hand it now to you, Steve, to give a little bit of history and commentary, Mr. Gerlich, about the land.
Thank you. All right. Thanks for allowing us to be here. My name is Steve Gerlich. I'm a long-term resident of Government Hill, and I'm speaking today for the council. What I have here in this presentation is a short brief on what's called the Port Track J, which is the old defense fuel site. This was a military operation built in 1942. It stored bulk fuel for aviation for the base. There were 26 tanks on it, 10 million gallons. It operated for 54 years, but it did suffer some heavy contamination from petroleum product spills and was shut down in 1996, declared an EPA brownfield site, and it's been vacant for 26 years. The old defense fuel site actually contains a number of tracks. There's a track Q, track G, a track Y. Colloquially, although the neighborhood considers it track J, and that's what I'll be speaking of today. All right, so over the last couple of years, the site is cleaned up enough so where the contamination levels have gotten low enough to allow redevelopment after 26 years. And the port director, Steve, and his predecessors have been meeting regularly with the council to provide updates on their plans and to seek input on the neighborhood's concerns and what the vision is for that land. We both agree that this sort of a collaborative process will ensure that impacts of development are managed. So there are 3 projects or proposals that are currently on the table for Track J. The first is the cell tower. Vertical Bridge has been very engaged with the neighborhood. They've come to multiple council meetings. They have met with residents. They have toured the neighborhood. They have actually performed a Photoshop exercise where from various viewpoints of the neighborhood, they put in where the cell tower bridge is going to be. And they are aware of how their types of projects can impact neighborhoods. But the proposed design and the placement has demonstrated to have visual impact, and the neighborhood does support this proposal as it stands. I mean, it's not great. It's more industrial development. It certainly could be worse, but it has been through a collaborative process managed to be acceptable to both parties. Second is the microgrid and solar farm. So there's been several years of discussion about this possibility. The latest is this proposal that Steve has shared with us. And in it, there is a site plan that shows where this facility would be located. Currently, the council has minimal concerns about phase 1 of this, which is the electrical substation and associated upgrades. The biggest concern for the neighborhood, though, is the noise from emergency diesel generators they've been running for a while. But the port also shares this concern because they have office workers down there and workers next to it. So they are investigating hotel or hospital grade exhaust systems, which should take care of that. Phase 2 is the solar farm, and that has the potential to be non-controversial as well. And the port is studying the size and the shape of that. So hopefully that will be something that comes out that works for the both of us, but that has the potential also to be non-controversial. The last I want to talk about here is the safety buffer along the upper bench. First, a little bit of legislative history on that. This is a resolution that was approved almost 21 years ago, October 23, 2001, concerning the Port of Anchorage Master Plan. And there was a floor amendment by Assemblyman Teshi, and it says, consistent with the past position of the municipality as expressed in a letter from City Manager George Vacalis, if this land comes available to the city or to the municipality, it will be used, the upper lands will be used as a buffer, a safety buffer green belt on the top of the bluff. The sloping land below on Track J will be used for low-rise commercial port development, and the lower area of Track J will be used for industrial port development, including a dedicated area for military equipment if needed. So that was 21 years ago. 10 years ago, with the site acquisition ordinance, which was approved, it was approved 10 years ago, under the quit claim deed section 2, use and maintenance of a buffer zone, it says that the grantee shall maintain a buffer zone at the top of the property to reduce the impacts of future development on the neighboring Government Hill community. Then it goes on to describe what the part of Track J would be associated with this. And it gets into detail by saying that the development within the buffer zone property shall be limited to roads and paved areas constructed to accommodate parking vehicles, employees, and it shall not be used for the storage and staging of equipment, shipping containers, shipping vehicles, and other sorts of construction equipment. So clearly the intent, going back to Senator Stevens' time, was not to rebuild tanks or bulk storage tanks on the top of the bluff.
Or
All right.
vehicles, or,
Oh, right.
you know, more of the containers that are down.
Right.
Don't
Yeah.
make it a container transit yard.
Yeah, exactly.
Exactly, right. Heavy industry. It's meant to provide a buffer between heavy industry. We really have a unique zoning situation there where heavy industry, marine, commercial industry is zoned right next to residential. It's how the city grew up. It wasn't there to begin with, but that's what we're dealing with here. There are very few places in the city that have this type of unique zoning situation. So the port has been briefed on neighborhood concerns in detail on this. They're aware of the neighborhoods concerned. They're aware of the history, and the council remains ready to engage on the redevelopment of this part of the old defense fuel site. So on page 2 of the presentation, this is a map, a picture of what we just talked about. If you look at the one on the left-hand side, you can see Government Hill, which is the little peninsula extending down to the right. And then you can also see on the top J-Bear. So residential areas on the base adjoin the neighborhood. And they are protected from the industrial area by what's in green. That's the existing safety buffer. And you can see Track J right in the middle. That's the last piece of it. That has been vacant for 26 years, ready for redevelopment. So what we just talked about here, number 1, you can see that's up in the top corner there, and that's the cell tower. So here is the view from Susan Nightingale Park. You can see the cell tower location, just about as tall as some of the trees there. So not too bad. There are other vantage points when you move over towards the Commons, towards AT&T. It starts to look more prominent, but that's a much more industrial view shed, considering the big tower that they have. Number 2 is the microgrid infrastructure that we were just talking about here. You can see the PV and generation. That's where the diesel generators would be. The yellow lines there were originally of concern, but in conversations with Steve, and he got back to us very quickly, they plan on using the existing below ground high voltage lines that Gas Electric has. So it's not going to be new power lines directly across the neighborhood or something to deal with. So far, that looks great. Number 3 is where the solar farm would be located. So that's still to be determined. And then number 4 is the last thing I want to talk about, which is this upper bench, which would be the continuation on the completion of the Greenbelt Safety Buffer. And that's on the last page here. Currently, there's 8 ideas being floated for this redevelopment, and we're working with the port. We're working with Parks and Rec, working with our representative assembly folks, and we're working with EPA because it is a brownfield site, and DEC on the allowed uses. So if we start, this is a 7-acre plot of the top. You can see by the contours here, this is the flat area that adjoins the neighborhood. Starting on the left on the bottom, the first would be to move the security fence. Right now, it's got a chain link fence. It's very high, Constantine wire, surveillance cameras, very military looking sort of operation. That would be moved below the bluff line, below the sight line. That's the yellow. Number 2, the bluff trail connection. Several years ago, we just completed with volunteer effort in the neighborhood a trail around the Government Hill on the bluff. And this would be the connecting piece that goes from Suit and Nightingale Park to the Commons. That's the black line. Number 3 would be a port overlook kiosk with bench describing the activities that Steve and his folks do down in the port. There's a lot of interest in that. An off-leak dog park could be put in up here. The port is interested in a secondary emergency access road that comes up through here that would be maintained for them to get in and out in emergencies. A solar education farm. The school uses the Commons quite a bit. We had a great harvest this year. They come over and made apple cider and checked out and had honey from the hives. And they also use this trail for PE, for exercise to go around Government Hill. This connecting trail and a solar farm demonstration kiosk would be great for these kids to be able to stand there and look at their renewable energy future and what's coming for Anchorage. 7 and 8 back in this corner here would be the potential for a community council location. Unfortunately, the neighborhood's historic community center, which is an old railroad building, was demolished by the city several years ago. And so we, as part of our neighborhood plan, we were looking for a place to put a new one. And this edge of Track J never had a tank on it and may well be the cleanest part of the bluff and could support something like that. We have an old wireless building, one of the old remaining few historic buildings in town. That was the original radio station for Alaska. That could be brought there and be part of the community council center. And then a nature play area. This is right across the street from the Commons. It could be what's called an unstructured play area for kids, just basically a safe area with woods, with line sites where they could play. And then the trail to Government Hill. So those are the neighborhood thoughts. I want to emphasize that Port has got a great relationship working with Steve and his predecessors on developing this plan. And we look forward to working with you folks on realizing it.
Thank you. And so I invited Steve and members of the Government Hill Community Council here because this is the first time since I've been on the body nearly 6 years that Track J has landed in front of us. And I want to make sure members of the body understand that there is a long conversation. And if you look at page 2 of the presentation, there's that green kind of U shape that goes all the way around the neighborhood. What the neighborhood is effectively asking is that that buffer, that's that green, continue basically to the AT&T building on the bluff lands so that the lands that historically had these tank farms have been long cleared and sitting vacant. We can move the fence and make it so that that little section there, not little, I guess 7 acres, but relative small compared to the, I think, what is it, 115 acres?
Track J?
Yeah, that whole
46.
46 plus the other section, that it is kind of restored to the neighborhood. And I am trying to bird dog this. It's been a trick to get it moving forward. But since we're talking Track J, I want to bring that up and you'll be hearing more. So Steve, thank you. Mr. Benjamin, sorry, my brain. Mr. Bowman.
Not a problem at all. Just while we're talking about this, I wanted to, there's a couple little legal steps we'll need to take because as Steve mentioned, there's a platting restriction that was put in place by the original deed from the DOD. And it's also a deed restriction, but Government Hill Community Council and all the folks involved have already done a great job. I think we'll easily be able to get the deed restriction from DOD removed. They've already indicated that they're willing to do that once we have a plan. And then we'll just need to go in front of planning and zoning to adjust the plat to reflect that it, as you mentioned, it's kind of restricted to being used as a parking lot. But that's an exercise of just going in front of the planning and zoning board and adjusting the plat. But so
Planning board. Yeah. Right. So we're not quite there, but You have now been briefed, and now we can get back to the red meat of the presentation. Thank you, Steve, for being here. Yes, Ms. LaFrance, sorry.
Thank you,
There are some
Mr. Chair. Just a question on the time frame for this. I know we have the one item pertaining to the communications facility, but just in terms of creating that safety buffer, how long do we expect it to take?
Well, the neighborhood's been waiting 26 years. And in fact, when I first moved to the neighborhood, there
So,
were.
so as the landlord for the other part of this, let me go ahead and see if I can help a little bit. We've been a little slow to get down into the weeds on this because we don't yet have a plan, a site vision for how a solar farm would be laid out. We're at long, and part of that is because we've been struggling with, do we own it or do we lease the property to a private concern to install it, operate it, and manage it? And we're close to coming up with that decision. And of course, we don't do anything without bringing it to you guys to ultimately approve. But we're about a week and a half away from a solar farm company coming up here and doing a site visit and laying out what would be the optimum solar farm for us. Then the next step, I believe, would be lay that on top of this and see if there's any conflicts. And can we work through those conflicts so that we can all walk away with a win here? And that's the plan. So, I hate pushing this down a road and down a road and down a road, but I think we won't be sitting here this time next year trying to agonize over how to carve the kingdom, if you will. I think we'll have a plan that everybody will be, reasonably certain will work for us, and have that presented to the assembly. Because I don't own the land; the municipality owns the land, and there's a real estate services nexus involved in this as well. And so we're going to take a lot of instruction from all of you on what to do. We'll voice our opinions. The community will voice theirs. And we'll come up with a solution. I'm not worried that we're not going to come up with a solution.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
And I would kind of loosely quote Mr. Gerlich when he said that project has the potential to be non-controversial. That's what he said. And so that's what everyone is working toward, is the potential and then the reality of it being non-controversial.
You can assure that if all the humans are taken out of the equation.
So I think maybe the implications are starting to arise in people's imaginations. Ms. Alatel.
Thanks. So the lease before us is for a term of 5 years with 9 5-year options.
Yes.
I guess the question becomes, if this plan progresses, if this particular cell tower location doesn't work out, because I hear that there might be potentially competing interests. Right now, the neighborhood is fine with the potential location of the cell tower and the idea of it going in there, as happy as anyone ever is about a cell tower. That said, as these plans progress, there is the opportunity for conflict. Is the idea here to build around this because of such 9-year option, or 9 5-year options?
Oh, yeah.
That's a very large option.
It's a heck of a lot of time.
On a municipal lease.
Mm-hmm.
So talk to me a little bit about my concern, which
Sure.
is that there could be a potential conflict, and what's driving, 45 years of potential extension past the first one's 50 years.
Well, Sherry Greenshields is sitting over there. I'm gonna let her correct me if I say anything wrong.
Before you do that, are we done with questions about the track J, the green space, the buffer? Because it's kind of it's obtuse. It's connected but obtuse. Then Steve, I'm going to say thank you. Feel free to stick around, and then maybe we'll have the representative from Vertical Bridge come on up and take your spot.
Right.
Thank you, Steve.
Thank you for the time.
Yeah. So we've been talking with Vertical Bridge for the better part of a couple of years now. So this wasn't a overnight kind of bright idea that we've gone on to. And when they came to look for sites to locate the tower, we purposely avoided every possible location that could be part of this discussion that we're having with Government Hill. So it is literally off the beaten path, but up there on the hill, outside of where there's any interest in the community of having a square foot of anything. So So we've done that due diligence, and we've talked with them about the siting. If the siting works for them, I'll have to defer to them to tell you the why on the port at all, part of it. But I like revenue. And there's a lease involved in this, and it's kind of out of the way. And the other benefit that the port gets out of this is we're going to get some space on that tower at little to no cost for antennas that we have to move off the roof of our current admin building that there's no roof for on the roof of the new one. And those are all security related, camera control related antennas that we have down on the port. So, we get a benefit from it being there. In addition to the fact that there's a revenue stream that comes with it, and the communities has already voiced that they don't have an issue with it, and it's out of the way. And as I understand it, because real estate services was involved in the conversations as well, that while it's 50 years, it's not unusual for a cell tower.
Okay, great. Thank you for that. So when assembly memorandums are prepared, that kind of context is really helpful. One, it possibly avoids having to have a work session or coming to a committee, because the antenna piece is like a key piece to know. Like, that's not expressed in these memoranda. It doesn't talk about that. It simply says we want to have a lease to put up a cell tower, and that's not the full story. Because what made this more compelling is not only are you getting revenue for the port, which is always important, but there's an additional function there, which is a core piece, and it actually is a part of the modernization. So that tells.
Well, it's not really.
Well, I mean, in some ways,
it's peripheral to it.
The
but
shift in building is
Yeah.
changing the building wouldn't be happening.
Oh, the building is,
if we
yes.
weren't modernizing the port. So that's what I'm saying. Like,
Okay.
that kind of information to me is really helpful to come to a decision point without having to have you here to answer, or you here to answer a bunch of questions.
Okay, no,
Thank you.
Fair enough. It's going to get really exciting when somebody wants to put a couple of 100,000 barrel petroleum tanks down there, and
Mr. Peterson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And Steve, this is very close to J-Bear. Are they aware that the cell tower is
They
going
are.
up? They have no problems with it?
no, and they have no problems with it, and it is so far removed from the flight path that that's not an issue at all.
I mean, and it's a 150-foot tower, so it's going to be required to have a blinking light on it
Yes.
anyway, right? Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair.
I think as a practical matter, it's worth noting that the neighborhood might have had some concerns, but for the fact that federal primacy is in effect here, the federal government has effectively taken away from the local government the authority to deny these kinds of leases, but we can set the terms of these leases. And so the neighborhood was effectively told, you can't stop it. And so your best bet is to figure out the best location for it, because it's going to be there unless we have another location that is better, which there wasn't. And so the federal primacy it's something that everyone needs to be aware of with the telecom industry as a whole. They could have moved it to another location on the site, but they were going to get it. Someone might disagree, but
Yeah, I don't remember saying that, but
you didn't. But
Oh, okay.
I mean, I've spent enough time with the National League of Cities working on telecom policy that the practical reality is the local government doesn't have any say. The feds have taken that authority from us in service of a telecom system. Yeah, it's just
Why we have cell phones that work in our city.
right, and that's the juxtaposition, right? People complain about not having service. I personally don't have a problem with the tower, but it's people complain about not having service, then they complain about having towers. You can't have both. So are there other questions before we move on to the next item? Nope. Okay, so this item will be before us and we'll have it.
I would appreciate a favorable vote on this.
You never know.
I don't see a raft of people lining up to talk to you about it.
No, the neighbors have, because of the drawings, it was very helpful for them to see that they can visualize it, and they were able to visualize it, and it reduced any fear that was expressed.
Well, a selfish request, knowing that it really isn't all about me. But if you can put this early on the public hearing agenda, because I'm going to be on the East Coast. And if it goes as late as it did last week, it'd be 3:00 in the morning for me. So,
Yeah, those are hard. Once I did that, and there was a local media blog that asserted that I was drunk at a meeting. No, I was just tired.
Yeah,
And so,
here.
anyhow, thank you for that input. Next up, yeah. I think we have the thickest package before us now. AO 2022-287, which is a resolution of the Anchorage Municipal Assembly approving changes to the 2021 basis of design concept submitted and recommended by the Port of Alaska Modernization Program and Design Advisory Board that will govern ongoing design efforts for the Port of Alaska general purpose cargo terminals. Steve.
And, well, Mr. Chair, what I was going to request was, can we move the NES 1 discussion up in front of that, which is what's next? A little bit in the interest of time, because I think this one is kind of time sensitive to get in front of you and get approved.
And do we have an item, like a number for that?
I thought it was on the agenda. I'm sorry.
It is on the agenda, but there's,
We do not have. This is David Ames, Jacobs Engineering, PAMP Program Manager. The recommendation to award has been submitted to purchasing, but I don't believe it has been assigned a memo number yet.
Yeah. But it is, it is going to be, when you see it, it's going to be time sensitive in the interest of letting you understand what we're talking about before you see it.
right.
If we could take a few minutes to do that
Absolutely.
now.
We'll go ahead
Way,
and
far and
take that.
away more time sensitive than the Design Advisory Board issue.
Okay, so though we don't have the item in front of us to review, please brief us.
Okay, thank you. It's good to see you all again. I'll start with what I think is some very good news, and this recommendation to award is part of it. So first of all, I'll give you a quick program update. Phase 1, the petroleum and cement terminal is complete. We are finishing up a closeout of the construction contract. We have some warranty issues we're dealing with, as always, on projects of this size, but that is complete. The construction is complete. The port is arranging the line soaking that's been requested by the users prior to commencement of operations. But that's all very positive news. The next is that moving on to phase 2A.
Wait, before you move off of that one,
Sure.
I've heard mixed messaging. Is the PCT open and ready? When you say complete, what do you mean?
The construction contract is complete with exception of the warranty issues that we're sorting out. There's a warranty issue with the crane, but that is being resolved. And so that's under the construction contract. The line soaking, line flushing that has been requested by the users prior to accepting the facility is something the port is managing. And that has to be done prior to operation. I'll let Steve give an update on that.
There's an American Petroleum Institute standard that the users requested before they bring a ship up to that dock. They want us to assure that there is no leftover contamination, leftover construction stuff in the pipes before the first fuel makes its way, through the valve yard to their tanks. So we've had to put out an invitation to bid to have somebody, sign up to take care of that for us. So you're going to see that come before the assembly for award, because it's surprisingly pricey because of the fuel prices that we're seeing nowadays. But it's a necessary step so that we have a facility that the petroleum users will use and are anxious to do it. So we just need to get over this one hurdle. It is not a marine terminal construction requirement. And that's why it wasn't part of the contract. We did everything in accordance with the contract to clear a marine terminal, refined petroleum marine terminal facility for use. This is an extra step that is being required of us to do by the users.
Mm-hmm.
So we're going to go ahead and, we're going to go ahead and do it and accommodate them.
So practically, this is just for the purposes of all of us who've been on this project for a few years, we would very much welcome the opportunity to participate in
A ribbon cutting.
a ribbon cutting process when
Yeah.
you're there.
We thought we'd defer that till springtime.
Okay, so next year, next year. Okay, very good. So now we understand what complete is. And by warranty issues, effectively, just like when you buy a house, you do a review, any home warranty issues, blue tape, get it all done.
Right. There are a couple that we're having to hold the contractor to now, replacements of parts that aren't properly functioning, but we'll get them resolved
So it's
prior
mostly
to
complete.
this.
Thank you.
cleaning. Yeah. Okay. Phase 2A, the admin building is underway. Site prep is commenced for construction. And now the NES1, the next big marine phase, is ready to move ahead. Before I say that, phase 2B is the cargo docks, and that is, of course, the subject of the Design Advisory Board memo that you mentioned. That is under preliminary design and permitting. So, but the subject here, this is the NEX completed marine construction. And then the North Extension Stabilization, some of you may remember I was here in February to just give an update on what this was, give a background of what this is. This is the next big step in the marine construction process, which is to begin knocking down the failed construction of the PIEP era. Okay, this is a replacement of or a demolition of the sheet pile bulkhead that is out there, in combination with excavation of the fill material and dredging offshore of that, and then the stabilization of the shoreline with a revetment and ground improvements inshore of that revetment. And that is necessary to stabilize that area and open up the area for to improve navigability for the expansion. This NES1 project, there's nothing that design was done several years ago as part of the preliminary design was done several years ago as part of the KMJV joint venture. It is finally has gone out to bid. It was funded through funding security was provided by the bond authorization last year, the $165 million. We have also applied for federal grants, or the port has applied for federal grants for this in the mega grant and a PIDP grant for $68.7 million related to this, and we are still waiting for the results of that. But we released the RFP in June, received proposals August of this year. Evaluation yielded a clear preference, both commercially and technically. It should be publicly announced today. Purchasing got the recommendation yesterday, publicly announced that it will be Manson Construction. The recommendation to award has been provided to purchasing, and we are expecting the assembly memo to be either on the 9th or the 22nd of November consent agendas. We had heard from purchasing yesterday that it may even get on the 25th, but for our purposes, the 22nd is really the drop dead date because of the validity of the bids. And the commercial details, the total construction estimate is about $114 million. You've probably heard estimates of 125 and 132 in the past in the finance plan. Those estimates include things like program management, construction management, design management. But for this contract, the estimate was 114 million. The low bid or the preferred bid came in at 97 million, or 97.5 million. We're suggesting a contingency of 15% versus the normal 10% because dredging's involved, and you all know the sedimentation issues at the port. So we would expect sedimentation to occur and needing to do some additional dredging, and rather than have to come back for additional funds there, we're asking that we increase the contingency contract authority, or excuse me, change order authority to 15%, which is 14.6 million, still under the 114 million original estimate. The bids are valid until the 22nd of December, which is why we need to be on either the 9th or 22nd consent agendas for approval. And again, this is all positive. Everything's within budget. The proposed schedules from the contractor is on. It fits within the schedule, and we're ready to move. And again, this is a huge step towards getting into phase 2 and rebuilding the cargo docks because it's a precursor event.
When you say 22 December, you mean the month, not the day?
Yes, no, that's the day. No, that's 22 December. So the bids are valid.
Until
And
December 27th.
after assembly approval, it takes up to 2 to 3 weeks to give notice to proceed. So that's why we need approval several weeks in advance. And after that date, the contractor has a right to adjust their price. So, yeah, so I'm sorry, I should have put the year on there, but it's 22 December.
Yeah. Thank you, Ms. Alto.
Thank you. So I have a couple of questions. So we have $68 million in grants pending. What's the ETA on learning whether or not those grants might come in?
We were expecting them in October, in early October, but they haven't come yet. So the announcement could be any day now.
Okay. So let's just assume we get $68 million in grants that were totally successful. How are we planning to cover the delta on the cost?
Okay, well, I'll take a crack at that. That's probably a question for us, not the contractor. So recall effective July the 1st of this year, which is FY '23 for the state, we have 25 million for the PAMP. If we get the 68 million, we also got from the state 100 million in matching funds that we could use dollar for dollar against whatever we get from the feds. So that basically creates 130 plus 25, plus the fact that we'd be 2.5 months away from FY '24, which from the state is another $75 million. So there's opportunity there to cover the cost of this, at least for the first year, without having to do anything clever.
So continue on past that. You said for the first year. So
Right.
what's the expectation in the second
Well,
year?
then the expectation in the second year is we will have gotten past all of this angst over what a surcharge might be and effectively put one in place.
Well, I think you're making an assumption there that
Well, I know,
you may
I
not
know
be
I'm
able
making an
to.
assumption, but at the end of the day, we're not building anything if there isn't a debt service component to it.
Okay. So you suspect that the I'm just going to use the $114 million amount, because it'll be slightly less than that, will be covered by federal and state grants.
I think we can.
Okay,
I think we can.
thank you.
Right. Mr. Dunbar, unless you're done. I'm done.
I guess when the item is introduced, I hope it states as much, that that's the expectation for payment, because we're going to be authorizing you to enter into an agreement for over $100 million without an identified fund source.
Well, not really, because you've already approved for us 65 million in borrowing authority for the PAMP.
But that requires
we have
this-
yet to tap into.
But that requires the surcharge. And
Yes, it
so
does.
cart before the horse, I think.
Yeah.
So it would be helpful when we have an item over $100 million to indicate where we expect to pay from it. You know, where do we expect the funding to come from? I mean, because it's not going to indicate that, it is my guess right now. It's going to say, we expect this bid award we want you to award this contract or award this, proposal. But the question is going to be, where is the money coming from? And what I just heard is state and federal grant funding. And I really hope that's in the
And port equity.
documentation. And port, okay,
And port
great.
equity.
Because I didn't know that until I just asked the question. And that this is a big commitment. I think it's a necessary commitment. It's a big commitment. Thanks.
And you are correct that the recommendation to award basically says what I've just said and says that it's within the budget that's been given to the city. When we opened the shopping cart, I guess is the term, within the purchasing department, it was tagged to unencumbered funds for the port. So the port, it fell within the unencumbered funds category when they gave us the what would be the charge code, I guess.
So I would note that the chair and I are having discussions about some of the procedures for moving forward contracts that don't have identified funding sources with them, that it's becoming clear that we need to develop a more thorough process. And this isn't related to the port. This is related to the municipality in general. And so I think this conversation speaks to a bigger, broader issue that is kind of confronting us now. And so we are working on kind of a list of areas in which some thought needs to be put in place about how we might amend the code to make sure people understand where the money is coming from that we're spending when we make proposals. Because there's just some holes in our process. It's becoming apparent. So I don't have any more specific for that now. The chair's furrowing her brow at me, but I just want to put that out there since this is germane to that. Mr. Dunbar.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I was wondering if you could speak a little bit to some of the practical realities of what NES1 will look like for our residents. So during the petroleum cement terminal, for example, there was a very loud noise that people would hear occasionally, from a very large, like the world's largest jackhammer or largest hammer. This strikes me as there's going to be a lot of material pulled out initially. And then, a lot, like the most that has been pulled out of anywhere in a long time in Anchorage. And so, what roads will the trucks be going down? Where will they be headed? That kind of thing. Like practically speaking, what will the impacts be on Anchorage from this project?
Okay, so the first year is only landside work. It is the ground improvements for along that shoreline, that sort of thicker yellow area. Okay, that's deep soil mixing. Effectively, it's drilling rig perforating cylindrical. Drilling into the soil and then filling it with cement. Okay. So that will be the primary work next year. There will be some spoils from that will just be stored on site. In the second year is when the demolition will occur. All of the material, it's about 1.3 million cubic yards. 1.2 million of that is expected to be disposed of offshore through the dredging process. Okay. The upper 100,000 cubic yards is expected to be usable material for other sites. So it will be stored on site temporarily to be reused through the city's resale or reuse project. Otherwise, there should not be a great deal of traffic. There should not be a great deal of disposal traffic going on and off, because then the sheet pile wall will be removed as material is being cut back and pushed down towards excavators to put it into a barge for offshore disposal. The dredging would be done by either a clamshell or a cutter suction dredge like what's out there now. So I don't expect that to be excessive traffic or noise. What I would expect, the biggest noise factor is that the sheet piles that are there now will be extracted with an impact hammer and a vibratory impact hammer. I don't expect them to be nearly as noisy as driving piles, but that would be a daytime noise.
So three quick follow-ups to that then. Does that mean we have to maintain the beluga spotting towers? Okay, so
that is
you're
correct.
saying yes.
Yes.
Okay, so, and could you repeat, where is the metal going to go? It's a tremendous amount of metal right on the front that's going to be pulled off. You said offshore, as in we're going to.
No, excuse me. That's only the soil would be disposed of offshore. The metal goes to the contractor for scrap.
And that will probably leave the state, or do you think it will be reused here in state?
I expect that it would be reused in the state because there's a need for it. It's they aren't reusable structures, so it would have to be melted down, but I would expect that there would be a use for it in the state.
It seems like a really huge amount of very valuable metal that's in the state. So I kind of want it to stay here. And my last question is, when they are filling with the cement, are they going to be using enough cement that it will materially impact cement prices in the city?
It's effectively one shipload of cement. I don't expect that it will because these prices have already been negotiated by the bidders. But I can't say for sure, but I don't expect that it would.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
If I could add, if I just add a couple of points, one of the other recent good news stories that came out of this whole process here, and a reason why it took a little longer than normal to negotiate the contract was because of the fact that we have a local cement supplier who gets all their cement from Asia. And could they potentially be the source of this cement? Or do we run the risk of violating some Buy America clause should we get federal grant money to help cover the cost of some of this? And we were waiting for the ruling for MARAD that said cement was exempt from the Buy American rules. So there's an opportunity for a company that delivers cement right to our front door through the port to be the source of the cement for this, which is good for all of us. That we have a local company that's going to benefit significantly from this, and it opens the door also because they have a pretty extensive what's the term? They forms. They can pour pile caps. They can pour all the other things that are really made of concrete, not cement. That could be part of the structure. It doesn't exclude us from going for federal grants because that cement, as part of that, is a non-issue now as well. So there's opportunities to get some cost savings overall on this because the source of one of the products is local, which is pretty cool. And boy, there was one other point that I wanted to make, but insignificant compared to what was just said. So if I think of it, I'll bring it up again. But thanks for
Quick
asking, because
clarification.
this is a big deal for us.
It was stated that the two things, metal goes to the contractor. Does that mean that's just an asset that they have?
They're responsible for disposing of it, and yes, they are. That's pretty standard that they're free to
Resell it.
Yeah.
And then how would metal be smelted in the state of Alaska or repurposed in a way? How is that even possible?
I'm not sure. I'm new to Alaska.
I
but
don't
is
believe there is anywhere in the state of Alaska that refines metal from or other materials. So I don't know how it could, unless it had a reuse, be managed other than shipped to Tacoma. Mr. Cross.
Yeah, another part of that, as we discussed in previous meetings, that you're not just concrete, but you're going to need considerably sized quarry and large rocks that were going to be brought in. And I know there's conversations whether Clutna Inc. was going to provide those out of their old Glen quarry, or whether or not, if they couldn't get their approvals because there's concerns with the neighbors over the blasting, things like that. Do we know if that's been resolved through a Clutna Inc. or will we have a Clutna Inc. or will they be getting the rocks further north like Healy or so? Because I would imagine, depending on whether you get them local or a couple 100 miles away, it would add a significant cost increase to the project.
So the contractor has specified prices based on what they're expecting to get. They still have to do quarry testing. They feel they have sources that they can use. This is an extremely large rock that we're expecting to use. So the contractor has specified several possible locations to buy it, but has not. They, after notice to proceed, they would do their quarry testing and define which one they would specifically use. I don't know the specific issue.
And my understanding, it wasn't several, it was two. I could be wrong, but if they bid it and they're fixed to it, I hope they're not gambling entirely on being able to get that locally just in case that falls through, because the cost could be double if they have to go up near Denali to find those specific rocks that they need. So thank you.
Others? So I am not hearing from anyone else, but we don't have this item. Can't guarantee it'll move if we haven't been able to review it. last minute work is stuff that is becoming harder for us to find 7 votes on. And so, but that said, the sooner the better, so that people can start chewing on the specific items. And now we have just 3 minutes left for this meeting. And Steve, I'm going to give you 1 minute to lay out a preamble for the conversation about the base of design, but I don't think we're getting there today.
No, and what I came today to do was to suggest to you, there's a couple of ways that you can go on this. You can direct the clerk to not put it on the agenda at all, or you could put it on the agenda and vote to postpone it indefinitely. And I suggest that because, if you read into what it was we were proposing for your approval on this, there was a section of homework assignments, if you will, that we gave to Jacobs to do a little bit more background in preparation for Terminal 2. We had initially decided at this Design Advisory Board meeting that we would have a concurrent dock to some width. And we agreed that we would extend that as a completed facility to a certain width all the way through Terminal 2. Through what we're calling the tote berth and what we're going to stop calling the tote berth and what we're going to stop calling the Matson berth. Because damn it, this is the Port of Alaska in Anchorage. It doesn't belong to the users, it belongs to us. And we're going to have 2 terminals, Terminal 1 and Terminal 2. What we asked Jacobs to do was, could you cost out making the dock the same width all the way to the north end, and tell us what the cost of that would be, what the advantages and what the disadvantages of that would be. And there were a couple of other things on there that are escaping my mind right now. We are very close to reconvening the Design Advisory Board and discussing those matters. So to wait on this, because this is not time sensitive, to wait on this and let us come back to you with a more complete picture, a more complete basis of design, a concept, not what we're going to build, but the concept that we can hand to the designer of record when we hire one to mature through 35, 65, 95, 100%. Then we have a design. Then we'll know what it costs. Then we can have serious conversations about how we're going to pay for it. But we don't even know what we're going to build yet, to a degree enough for everybody to fall on their sword over how much it's going to cost to build. So this is kind of one of those cart before the horse things. And it's a long way of saying, if this does not, if you don't pass this, I'm over it. Because you'll hear from us again in a few months with a more complete picture of what we believe the cargo dock should be.
Okay,
Or
so
you can pass this and know that because we're talking about a basis of design, it could very well change when we come back to you again, which we promised we would do.
okay, so one person in the queue, but really we don't have time. Is it super important, Mr. Dunbar?
I mean, yeah, I think so. We just said the
Spend 5 minutes.
same width, continuous all the way through. I don't understand why, if one portion of it is lift on, lift off, and one portion is roll on, roll off.
Okay.
Why does the roll on, roll off part
I'm
need
gonna
the same width?
Intervene here and say
Yeah.
we're getting into the specifics of the design conversation,
Yeah.
and I think we're going to have to hold that question.
Yeah.
And before we adjourn the committee, I'm going to ask, does any member of the public wish to be heard? Now would be the time. Anyone on the phone? *6? Nope. Okay, there is nobody who wishes to be heard under audience participation. And with that, I'm sorry, Mr. Dunbar, but that's an important question, but it's a question that is worth an hour of conversation, not worth 2 minutes. So with that, I would move to adjourn or ask for a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
We are adjourned. Thank you.